For decades, professional wrestling in America was not a single empire, but a patchwork of regional territories, each with its own champions, television deals, and loyal fan bases. In the middle of that system stood the McMahon family, first under the steady hand of Vince McMahon Sr., and later under the far more aggressive vision of his son, Vince McMahon. The story of how Vince McMahon took over wrestling is not just a tale of business expansion. It is a story of ambition that shattered tradition, of a son who rejected his father's unwritten rules, and of an industry that would never look the same again. To understand the takeover, you have to understand the system Vince Sr. operated within. Through the Capitol Wrestling Corporation, which later became the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and eventually the World Wrestling Federation, Vince Sr. was part of the National Wrestling Alliance territory structure. Promoters across the country respected geographic boundaries.
The stories that you hear about Vince Sr. don't revolve around ruthlessness or overly competitiveness. Once he had control in the Northeast, he was satisfied to kind of run that territory and do really well with it.
New York belonged to the McMahons. The Carolinas belonged to Jim Crockett. Minnesota had the AWA. Texas had its own circuits. They cooperated, shared talent, and avoided direct competition. It was a gentleman's agreement built on mutual survival. Vince Sr. was a traditional promoter. He believed in protecting kayfabe, maintaining the illusion of wrestling as a legitimate sport. He did not aggressively raid other territories for talent. He built around attractions like Bruno Sammartino and focused on strong relationships with local arenas and television partners. His philosophy was stability over conquest. Wrestling was a regional business, and he was content dominating his region.
I knew there was just some way I had to get my hands on this company.
June 6, 1982. It's sort of a red-letter date in wrestling history. Vince sat down with his father and his father's partners.
The deal was for $1 million.
Vince mortgaged everything he had, every dime that he had.
Then came his son. In 1982, Vince McMahon purchased the company from his father. At the time, the World Wrestling Federation was profitable but still regional in reach. Cable television was expanding. Pay-per-view technology was emerging. National syndication was becoming viable. Where his father saw a stable territory, Vince saw a potential national monopoly, and he was willing to break every unwritten rule to achieve it.
He had a vision to take his father's territory in New York and literally make it the biggest wrestling company, not only in the United States, in the world, to make it global.
The first major break from tradition was national television syndication. Vince began buying television time in markets that belonged to other promoters. Instead of respecting territorial lines, he invaded them. WWF programming started appearing in the South, the Midwest, and eventually everywhere. It was a direct challenge to the old order. Promoters who had once cooperated with the McMahons suddenly found themselves competing with them. But television alone was not enough. Vince needed stars, and he did not hesitate to take them from rival promotions.
This man is not a television illusion. He is not an artist's conception. He is not a figment of the imagination. He is the Hulk.
Making his first appearance in this arena, ladies and gentlemen, Hulk Hogan.
Vince is looking for the superhero. He's going national, but it's not going to work unless he has this larger-than-life person.
Hogan was the guy to choose. He had the great look.
I mean, to this day, if you ask somebody on the street to name a professional wrestler, they're probably still going to name Hulk Hogan.
Vince made Hogan just a perfect offer that he couldn't turn down.
Vince told him, we're going to put the belt on you. You're going to be our #1 guy.
He came in at the beginning of January 1984, and by the end of the month, he was the WWF World Heavyweight Champion.
He signed Hulk Hogan, who had been working with the American Wrestling Association. He lured away Roddy Piper, Paul Orndorff, and other recognizable names. The message was clear. If you had talent that could draw money nationally, Vince wanted them under his banner. This strategy destabilized smaller promotions. Territorial companies relied on top stars to sell tickets. When those stars left, attendance dropped, television ratings slipped, sponsors hesitated. Vince was not just competing, he was draining resources. In 1984 and 1985, Vince rolled the dice on an unprecedented event, WrestleMania 1. It was a closed-circuit spectacle blending wrestling with pop culture celebrities like Mr. T and Cyndi Lauper. Traditional promoters saw it as reckless. Vince saw it as necessary. He reportedly risked everything financially to make it work. When WrestleMania succeeded, it validated his national vision. Wrestling was no longer confined to smoky regional arenas. It was mainstream entertainment. The expansion continued. Vince leveraged pay-per-view to create recurring mega events. He locked talent into exclusive contracts, a major shift from the looser handshake deals common in the territory era. Wrestlers could no longer easily move between promotions. The WWF machine demanded loyalty and control. Meanwhile, rival promotions struggled. The American Wrestling Association faded. World-class championship wrestling in Texas declined. The most formidable competitor emerged in the form of Jim Crockett Promotions, which evolved into World Championship Wrestling. Backed later by Ted Turner's media empire, WCW had national television and serious financial backing. For a time in the 1990s, especially during the Monday Night Wars, WCW overtook the WWF in ratings. But even that rivalry ended with consolidation. In 2001, Vince McMahon purchased WCW's assets after years of intense competition. The final major rival on a national scale was gone. The territory system had already collapsed years earlier, and now the last alternative powerhouse had been absorbed. Contrast this with Vince Sr.'s approach. The father valued cooperation within a shared ecosystem. The son believed in domination of that ecosystem. Vince Sr. maintained boundaries. Vince Jr. erased them. The father protected tradition. The son disrupted it entirely. Critics argue that Vince McMahon's tactics put countless promoters out of business.
Your father, Vince McMahon, your father went around the country and shook the hand of every, you know I'm telling the truth, don't you? You know in your heart I'm telling you the truth, that your father shook the hand of every promoter in this country and swore to them that he'd never compete against them, that his son would never compete against them. And when your father died, you competed. And with your ruthless, merciless, take no prisoners attitude, you drove everybody out of business, didn't you, Vince? You ran all the competition into the ground and you stole all their ideas and you made yourself a billionaire out of it.
Family-run territories that had operated for decades could not compete with national cable exposure and aggressive talent raids. Wrestlers who once had multiple places to work found fewer options as the industry consolidated. An era of regional diversity gave way to a single corporate style. Supporters countered that the territory system was already weakening under changing media landscapes. Cable television and national advertising favored larger entities. In that view, Vince did not kill the territories. He adapted faster than they did. He turned wrestling into a global brand, transforming it from a niche regional attraction into billion-dollar sports entertainment. Under his leadership, the company rebranded from the World Wrestling Federation to WWE in 2002, expanding further into international markets, merchandising, film, and eventually streaming. The takeover was complete not just domestically, but globally. WWE became synonymous with professional wrestling for millions of fans. The philosophical divide between father and son remained striking. Vince Sr. operated in a system built on mutual respect among competitors. Vince Jr. believed competition meant elimination. One saw wrestling as a network of territories. The other saw it as a single empire waiting to be built. By the early 2000s, the landscape Vince Sr. had known no longer existed. The NWA territory map was history. WCW was gone. Extreme Championship Wrestling had folded. WWE stood alone at the top of the mountain. Whether viewed as visionary capitalism or ruthless consolidation, Vince McMahon's takeover reshaped professional wrestling permanently. In the end, the story is about evolution driven by ambition. A son looked at his father's successful regional business and decided it was not enough. He gambled on national expansion, broke long-standing alliances, absorbed competitors, and created a monopoly that defined an era. The cost was the collapse of the territorial system. The reward was global dominance. Professional wrestling before Vince McMahon was a mosaic. After Vince McMahon, it was an empire.